Hi everyone, another day, another handheld, with this one being the R43 Pro. The R43 Pro reminds me a little of the "we have an Embedec handheld at home" meme of the RG405V, as both it and the R43 Pro are big and bulky vertical handhelds. While we're unboxing, there's a couple of curiosities with the box. Mainly that it states the R43 Pro has 4 gigs of RAM, where all listings and performance indicates that it does actually have 2 gigs of RAM. I also got a smile from the box's disclaimer saying that if there are disputes or any other liabilities caused by copyright, it has nothing to do with our company, followed by a big exclamation mark. But there we go. So moving on to the specs, the R43 Pro is powered by, well, according to the box, the RK3566, or according to its listings, the RK3288. Given how sluggish Nintendo 64 runs, I tend to favour the older chip option here, but point being that you're not going to be playing through any intensive Nintendo 64 games on the R43 Pro. Otherwise, we've got 2 gigs of RAM, a 4.3 inch display, a 4000 mAh battery, and a weight in around 260 grams. We'll have a little look-see at the stock firmware later, but essentially it's an incredibly stripped down version of Emulec. So, straight out of the box, the R43 Pro has a bit of an angry look about it, thanks to its angled select and start buttons, but I guess it does have a couple of reasons to pull a frown. The silverish text on the grey shell doesn't look good, and the plus and minus volume buttons are a bit bizarrely placed. Underneath, we do have the microSD card slot, headphone jack, USB-C charge port, and the power switch. From this angle and the back, you can really see how swollen the back grips are. And we've got some familiar clicky shoulder buttons placed top centre on the back too. I must say that I do find the R43 Pro surprisingly comfortable from its default joystick and face buttons position. It's just unfortunately a bit of a stretch from jumping from D-pad to face buttons to then the shoulder buttons simultaneously. So, moving on to the controls, the R43 Pro sits in that awkward area where they're not absolutely terrible, but just have a lot of compromises to deal with. The best elements are the standard Switch style joysticks. They've got fine travel to them, are pretty responsive, and have no real issues. The non-game controls are bizarrely placed, but at least pressed without issues, and both the face buttons and D-pad suffer from recessing far too much into the case. The glossy face buttons have almost 2 layers of recession to them, where a standard press is fine, but if you apply a little bit too much pressure, the button will recess further into the case, which can be quite distracting during hectic play and makes it near impossible to button mash. So no surviving the Metal Gear Solid torture sequence on this one. The D-pad also suffers from a couple of its own quirks. It's shaped so all directions angle in towards the centre, but also has a very slippy surface to it. So I find my thumb slipping all over the place when trying to pull off multiple directional inputs. It also has the same kind of 2-layered recession the face buttons have, so it can be a frustrating experience overall. Somewhat unexpected though is that the shoulder buttons are actually incredibly responsive and work very well alongside the joysticks. In terms of the stock firmware experience with the R43 Pro, we seem to have a custom Emulec build that isn't too bad for newcomers, but unfortunately has been stripped of all of its customization options. You can save and load states, but that is about it. Mine also arrived defaulted Chinese, but thankfully this is an easy change to English. It is a shame that all of the customization RetroArch options are not easily accessible, and some performance issues such as Nintendo 64 is particularly sluggish. But as a bare bone stock firmware, I guess we have seen far worse on the channel. Anyway, I'll cut some gameplay footage now and summarise back up at the end. So at the end of the day, the R43 Pro is another retro gaming handheld around the $50 mark. That isn't outright terrible, but it is unfortunately pretty forgettable. Handhelds like the R36S are available for cheaper and do a lot more at this stage. So although I have regrettably covered a lot worse than the R43 Pro on the channel, it isn't exactly pro enough to earn a recommendation. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching.